Velvet. That's right, folks. We are diving back into the world of David Lynch, a director who I have talked about a lot in the past couple of weeks. I've written a lot about him too. Just one of those guys that's great and so interesting and just makes movies that are fun. Last week we talked about Mulholland Drive, arguably his greatest work of art. Is that fair to say? It must be. That movie's incredible. But today we're going to talk about a film that came out before Mulholland Drive that many might consider his most defining work up until Mulholland Drive. It's so crazy to think of David Lynch because he is a guy who has had defining works in every decade he's been a part of. He's like Spielberg in that way, like Scorsese in that way, where they're just directors who say something about each decade, like Eraserhead, Blue Velvet, Twin Peaks, Mulholland Drive, Twin Peaks The Return. Like, he just gets it, and he's saying something each time. And Blue Velvet, this was a movie that I have seen before, but it never, hit me. It was never one where I'm like, oh, yeah, this is gonna, resonate with me. Because I'm a young guy, and I watched this one very young. I think 15 years old. And I haven't had any worldly experiences at that point, so it didn't really mean anything to me. But getting back into the world of David Lynch and studying him for this episode and other topics we've done on him, I just really start to see his worldview in a different way and how he thinks of things and how he behaves. There's just an alluring sense of dread that he sees in mundanity, and I think that's really interesting. Not that you're like trapped in this world and you're like an outcast who can't escape this suburban lifestyle, which is Tim Burton, but more like there's so much beauty around us, but there's something dark hiding beneath it. And I think that is more apparent in this movie than any other except for Mulholland Drive. So let's get into it. Blue Velvet. We open up with some Blue Velvet. And then we just see, America. It's great. It's the 80s. Everybody's got a white picket fence. The most white picket fence movie you've ever seen in your life. What if, the lawns that everyone's on are just green? Everyone's just drinking a lemonade and has beautiful red lips. Just what if America was this idyllic version of itself that it never was, and everyone had a good time? And then some guy's dad has a heart attack, or he hurts himself while he's gardening, gets in the hospital, and we're introduced to Kyle MacLachlan. This is not the first time that Kyle MacLachlan works with David Lynch, because he did Dune before this, which is really weird to consider. He's so weird in Dune, so good in this. I say weird in Dune. He's pretty good in Dune, but you ever just look at a guy and you're like, this seems like exactly the type of clay a director wants to sculpt into something. I think that about Kyle MacLachlan and Laura Dern in this movie. You're looking at two fresh-faced kids who are just the perfect embodiments of what David Lynch thinks America is. So Kyle MacLachlan, his character, who is Jeffrey, he's just walking down one day, stumbles onto a severed ear in a field, and he takes it to the local authorities, and thus begins his obsession of what is this ear and how is it connected to stuff in this town, which is just David Lynch saying isn't it weird that bad things can happen in the most beautiful idyllic place in the world? A theme he will play with more in Twin Peaks. This is so the predecessor to Twin Peaks, where it's the themes are there, everything's beautiful, small town. We deal with lumber. And then suddenly, what if there was a secret gang that terrorizes people, sexually assaults women, kidnaps their children, and just ruins people's lives? And what if Jeffrey wanted to figure out what that was? So he just goes full obsessive, trying to figure out okay, what are some cases I can hear about? He starts having a little affection being thrown towards the detective's daughter, who is Laura Dern. So they spark up a little fun little buddy cop romance thing where there's these two kids who are weird and different. They're gonna walk down the street and just talk about isn't it weird that we found an ear, and where would it belong to, and who's this person that's reporting their husband missing or something. That leads us to going to a specific apartment where this musician is reporting that her husband is missing. Now, this introduces us to another thing that David Lynch really likes, and that is Isabella Rossellini. And I don't think we've talked about her yet. We've talked about her mom, because Casablanca, my favorite film ever made. This might be the most she's ever looked like her mom on screen. You know, like as soon as she walks into frame, as soon as we see her like singing Blue Velvet, as soon as she's just in any shot, I'm like, oh my God, you look like your mother. Oh my God, you sound like her too. And it's utterly amazing what she is asked to do in this movie, like what Dorothy has to go through and accomplish. It's incredible. It is such a David Lynchian character who's like this picturesque woman with pale skin, beautiful black hair, always wearing the finest robes. She sings to all these men in this small town. She's the elegance within like this lumber district. And she just exists in this house, and she just doesn't do anything. She's just like a beautiful woman. And then Jeffrey's just getting a little too interested in solving some problems. So he sneaks into her house after he pretends to be like a bug guy, and he hides in a closet. And I think this scene is just incredible. What happens? Like, there is some twisted perversions that you have in there. There is definitely this idea of David Lynch just having the thought, what if one day you just hid in a closet and watched somebody be assaulted or murdered, and you couldn't do anything about it. You're just like this voyeur on the wall watching as things happen. That is so Lynch too. Just not being able to stop the tragedy happening around you. That is such a him thing to deal with. And this sequence is one of the most beautifully shot things in his entire career. Just McLaughlin in the closet, the dark silhouette of him peering through like the visors, and seeing Isabella Rossellini run into this man named Frank, played by Dennis Hopper, and the pseudo-sexual aggression and passion and hatred and physical anger that these two exude on each other. It's insane. And she gets sexually assaulted. And then he just leaves. Like, Hopper just leaves. And then McLaughlin comes out of the closet and tries to comfort her, and that leads to another sexual encounter. And you're just like, what a weird turn of events with this like woman who's so broken and afraid, and this comforting thing is just like her falling back on the tricks that got her into this position. It's crazy. We'll bear the lead a little bit. Dorothy's husband and child have been taken by Frank and his people. They run the drugs throughout the town. They have a corrupt cop on their side, and she is doing sexual favors in turn of maybe getting her children back, or her child and her husband back. It's crazy. I am truly obsessed with everything Rossellini is doing in this movie. She is so gorgeous to look at. She is so powerful. She just stands out. Just such a huge contrast to the world she's a part of. It is phenomenal to see everything she does, and like the weird sexual relationship she develops with McLaughlin's character, like these two beings who are just like trapped in their own worlds, trapped in this insanity that they want to escape from. It's insane. But we got to give credit to Dennis Hopper, because I don't know many actors who could do that specific role as seriously as he did. I was sitting there thinking, this is why I'm not an actor. If somebody said to me, do this specific scene, I couldn't do it. That's not me saying the performance is good or bad, but the script is crazy. And playing it on this level of insanity while still being threatening, while still not like veering over into like the comedic element that it so easily could, is truly terrifying, and something only a genuinely talented actor could do. And Hopper, a legendary actor in his own right, this is the type of performance that redefines your career. This should, at least, where you're like, oh yeah, this guy, he's got some juice in the tank. It's crazy. It is a crazy performance. And he just demands it at every scene, just like taking the oxygen and is breathing it in and going, mommy, 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 daddy's ready. And it's just this so disgusting rape scene, and it's just brutal. And when later on he finds Jeffrey and Dorothy together in the house, and he's just like, come on, let's go for a little joyride. That sounds like a great thing to do. It's just amazing, like how terrifying he can present, because he's one of those guys that's just got that face that just screams, at any moment I could break loose and destroy everything around me. And it's really intense when he does that. the scenes in like where they're all in the car and they're all like trapped together, it's just tension fueled and everything's just terrifying. I really like that. And it's such a good way that Lynch just contrasts all the stuff going on with Dorothy, with Jeffrey going to hang out with Sandy, because it's like, let's just go to the high school and look at all the boys playing football in our cool little skirts, and we'll get like a Coca-Cola down at the diner. And then suddenly I'm in like this perverted world where there's like drug pushers and blood everywhere, and it's just like taking the two images that define everything Lynch is about. It's really brilliant and it's so cool. And the directing in this, like, I think Lynch, like I've said it before, he's a guy I've struggled with a lot when I was younger, and the more I'm coming to see his stuff now, the more it's working for me. I think he's got a very clear vision in mind, which is just showing you the beauty of this world and not being afraid of that it's beautiful. You know, some directors, I go back to Tim Burton a lot because there's a lot of like Edward Scissorhands comparisons you could make. He hates what he's showing you. He's like, this is making me uncomfortable. I want to be in like the dark colors. But not Lynch. Lynch is just, this is really appealing to me. Like, I want to live here. I want to live in this world and experience it this way. I think it's really beautiful. Like, I think Laura Dern's a genuinely cute girl, and she's going to go on a cool date with this guy, and they're going to have a good time at this dance, and we're going to like seeing them fall in love. But then we can't shy away from the drug trafficking that's going on behind the scenes with the corrupt cop, and that's going to lead us to a big battle where people are going to get hurt and things are going to go bad. It's really good. It's handled beautifully, and just goes to show you, like, when you have an idea, when you have a vision of the world, you can execute that in some very specific and cool ways, and that is what this movie does. I could 100% see how certain people can find every performance in here stiff or jarring, because everyone's sitting up very proper, everyone is very stiff-faced, unless you're Dennis Hopper, and then just ask to just be weird, you know, say weird stuff, just exist in weird ways. But it all works well. You buy like the weird pseudo love triangle where Jeffrey's going between these two women. I love the sequence of the diner where he's talking to Sandy, and he's saying like why he keeps going back to Dorothy's apartment, and it's just him explaining the appeal of seeing something that nobody else can see. That's the voyeurism that is just so apparent throughout this movie, the peeping Tom stuff, the perverted stuff, but not like perverted in like a disgusting way, perverted in the way you just like, there's something kind of interesting and romantic about seeing this stuff no one can see, or just like watching a woman change. There's something interesting to explore there in a filmic way. And that's what Lynch is saying. That is what Jeffrey is saying. And I really understand, and I like the idea that's not like a super sexual thing. It's just him being like, this is a level of intimacy that is lost to so many people, and I get to experience it in this way. That's pretty cool. That's a pretty cool thing to see happen. And he's doing that in a really interesting way. So I dig that. I really dig that. McLaughlin's so good. Like, I could sing his praises all day. He gets it. You know, Lynch found himself in like this weird guy, and he's like, you're going to be my little puppet forever. I'm going to make you a star. I love that so much. Now, this movie goes into some pretty standard directions. It takes a long time to build to its plot. And then it's like, well, what if everything just fell apart at the end because Jeffrey figured everything out? He gave the information to the police. And then Frank's like, I don't care. I'm going to kill all of you anyways. There's a really interesting sequence where Jeff and Sandy are about to go on a date, and they have a nice date. And when they're driving back to his place, they're like accosted by her ex-boyfriend. And before like anything gets like physical, we see Dorothy like run out. She's completely naked, covered in blood. She's been beaten and hurt. And she collapses into Jeffrey's arms, which makes Sandy go, what is happening? Who is this woman? She's in love with you? And it just turns into the weird idea of like, do you go to the bloody woman who's broken, or do you go back to Americana? Jeffrey chooses Americana, and he goes back to Sandy because they're in love and they're closer in age, and I don't know, whatever, but you know what I mean? And then it just leads to some intense sequences where Jeffrey goes back to Dorothy's house to try to like figure out what's going on. He finds her husband dead. It's his ear that he found earlier. And then the police officer is also dead too, the corrupt one, because Frank's gone loco and he's like chasing everybody and taking them down. The sets in this movie are incredible as well. Like, they're gorgeous. They're stunning. Dorothy's apartment in particular is just so good to contrast with, like, here's the white picket fence. Here's like the nice house with the birds singing. Hers is just like, look at all this carpet and colors that are different than everything else. Look at all this velvet. It's great. It leads to Dennis Hopper overacting being a freak, and then McLaughlin hiding in the closet and then shooting him in the head after he like tricked Frank into looking into another room. And that's kind of where like the plot ends, and we just get like some wrap up where it's like, this is the Lynch thing as well. This is the Lynch thing. He's not going to end on a dour note. Lynch does not end on a dour note. He's like, we won. Everyone's happy. We're moving on with our lives. Let's go get some apple pie and go back to Dad's house, and we'll all sit there and have a good time. And Isabella Rossellini will have her son come back, and everything's going to be happy. That is David Lynch. That's what he likes. He does not like the sad ending. He's like, everyone's happy. We killed the freak that was raping women. We killed him. No harm, no foul. This movie's so beautiful. It's so well executed. And I'm just so blown away by everything we're seeing here. It's so simple. The directing is simple. The editing is simple. But it pops and it shines and the colors are great. And it's just the best contrast you've seen from here's like a dark gothic woman to here's the bright blonde-haired beauty. They clash together in the form of Jeffrey, who can't figure out if he is a pervert or just a good Samaritan. And sometimes that's the struggle we all face. I'm kidding, of course. We're all good Samaritans. Beautiful people doing beautiful stuff. There is nobody who does it like Lynch. Nobody will ever do it like Lynch again. Man, this is a good time. I'm glad I went back and watched some of these. Are we going to do another Lynch one? I'm not sure yet. I did just get a bunch of DVDs I want to go through and see if there's anything interesting worth talking about. But we'll see what happens. I would very much consider another one. We'll see. But Blue Velvet, my goodness, 2 thumbs up. I don't know. It's incredible. It's incredible. So that's going to do it for this episode of Dramatic Tales. Thank you all for watching this review. Be sure to like and subscribe to the channel. As always, you can check me out on Instagram, TikTok, and Twitter. And of course, I will catch you in the next one. Have fun. Stay safe. Good luck.